Lily's small fingers traced the worn fabric of Mr. Hopsworth's ear, while she watched other children play across the learning center. The stuffed rabbit had seen better days. His left eye hung by a thread, and his belly showed patches where her birth mother had sewn him back together years ago on Earth. But he was hers, and he remembered home. "Why don't you join them?" Pip asked, settling beside her with all four arms folded neatly. The Quillen child's fur shimmered blue today, which meant he felt peaceful. "They don't want me there," Lily said. She didn't sound sad about it, just factual. At 6 years old, she had learned which battles to fight and which to avoid. Across the room, 3 Corthan younglings wrestled and roared, their scaled bodies crashing into furniture that was built to withstand their rough play. Drax was the biggest, his ridge of spines already showing the deep purple that marked future warriors. Grell and Vorna followed his lead in everything, like shadows copying their source. Rena chimed softly, her crystalline body catching the light and scattering rainbows across the floor. Lily had learned to understand the musical language of the lithoid people, and this particular melody meant, "They are foolish to ignore your friendship." "Thanks," Lily whispered, hugging Mr. Hopsworth closer. Teacher Morrow stood at the front of the room, his elderly Quillen body stooped with age, but his eyes still sharp. He believed younglings learned best through experience, which meant he rarely interfered in their social dynamics. Lily wasn't sure if that was wisdom or laziness, but it didn't matter either way. She had learned to be invisible when she needed to be. The Learning Center served all species on Sanctuary Station, a neutral hub where diplomats and traders from hundreds of worlds crossed paths. Most parents kept their younglings in species-specific groups, but a few believed in integration. Lily's mother was one of them, her mother. Lily smiled at the thought. Not her birth mother, who had died when the colony ship lost pressure and turned everyone inside into frozen statues, but Sashara, who had found her in the wreckage and refused to let her go, even when both human and dragon authorities said it was impossible. Dragons didn't adopt other species. It simply wasn't done. Their maternal instincts were powerful but specific, triggered by scent and biology that only applied to their own kind. But something had been different with Sashara. The moment she pulled Lily from the debris, something ancient and absolute had awakened in her chest. This was her daughter. Nothing else mattered. "Time to share your projects," Teacher Moros announced, his voice carrying across the chaotic room. Lily had drawn a picture during art period, using every color available to capture what she felt. She had drawn Sashara curled around her while she slept, the dragon's wing forming a protective canopy, small wisps of smoke curling from her nostrils like a living nightlight. She had drawn herself tiny in comparison, barely the size of Sashara's foreclaw, but safe, completely safe. One by one, younglings presented their work. A Quillen child had sculpted a model of his family's ship. A small gray creature from a water world had written a poem about rain. When Lily's turn came, she walked to the front on unsteady legs, holding her drawing carefully. Drax snorted when he saw it. "A dragon and a mammal? That's not a real family." "It is too," Lily said quietly. "Dragons eat things like you on my homeworld," Vorna added, and Grell laughed. Teacher Moros cleared his throat. "Thank you, Lily. A very colorful piece." Next, that was it. No correction, no defense. Just moving on. Lily returned to her seat, cheeks burning, and carefully rolled up her drawing. Pip patted her shoulder with 2 of his hands, but the gesture felt hollow against the weight of humiliation. The rest of the day passed slowly. Drax and his friends made sure to bump into Lily during movement exercises. Hard enough to bruise, but not hard enough to seem intentional. They knocked over her blocks during building time. They whispered just loud enough for her to hear about how humans were the weakest species in the known galaxy, barely capable of surviving on their own planet, let alone among the stars. By the time Sashara arrived for pickup, Lily was exhausted. The dragon had to duck low to fit through the Learning Center's entrance, her crimson scales gleaming under the artificial lights. She was massive, easily 4 times the size of the largest Corthan adult, with wings that could span the entire room if she spread them fully. Her eyes glowed like molten gold, and smoke drifted lazily from her nostrils with each breath. But when those eyes found Lily, they softened instantly. "Hello, little spark," Sashara rumbled, her voice deep and warm like distant thunder on a summer night. "Hi, Mom," Lily said, and just like that, the weight lifted. Sashara lowered her head and Lily climbed onto her neck, settling between two ridge spines that were perfectly spaced for her small body. Other younglings stared as they always did, some with curiosity, some with confusion, and some like Drax with barely concealed disgust. "How was your day?" Sashara asked as they left the learning center, moving through corridors that had been built wide enough to accommodate her size. "Fine," Lily said automatically. Sashara's steps slowed. "A little spark, I can smell distress on you." Dragons had senses humans couldn't match. Sashara could detect the chemical changes in Lily's scent when she was upset, scared, or lying. It made hiding feelings nearly impossible. "Just the usual stuff," Lily admitted. "Some kids don't think we're a real family." Sashara's body temperature rose noticeably, heat radiating from her scales. "What we are is none of their concern. You are my daughter. I am your mother. That is reality regardless of biology." "I know," Lily said, and she did. But knowing something and feeling it were different things. They reached their quarters, a modified living space with high ceilings and reinforced walls to accommodate Sashara's size. Home. The dragon curled into her sleeping alcove, and Lily scrambled down to the kitchen area, where everything was built at her scale. "I made something today," Lily said, unrolling her drawing. "It's us." Sashara's eyes locked onto the picture, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then a sound emerged from her throat, something between a purr and a growl, the dragon equivalent of a parent's proud tears. "This is beautiful, little spark. This is exactly us." Lily smiled, really smiled, for the first time all day. "Can we hang it up?" "Absolutely. In the place of honor, where I can see it every day." As Sashara carefully mounted the drawing on the wall with claws that could shred steel but handled paper like precious silk, Lily clutched Mr. Hopsworth and felt the warmth of home settle over her. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more whispers, more casual cruelties. But tonight she was safe with her mother, and that was enough. Outside their quarters, Sanctuary Station hummed with the business of 1,000 species living side by side. And somewhere in that vast complexity, a small human girl and a massive dragon proved that family was a choice, not a biological inevitability. Recreation period always felt like walking into a storm. Lily kept Mr. Hopsworth tucked under her arm as younglings of various species scattered across the learning center's play area, their energy filling the space with noise and motion. "Want to build a tower?" Pip asked, his blue fur brightening with enthusiasm. "Sure," Lily agreed. Anything was better than sitting alone. Rena joined them, her crystalline form refracting light as she moved. Together they gathered blocks from the shared materials bin, claiming a corner spot near the window that looked out onto the station's central hub. Ships came and went in the distance, tiny points of light against the black. "Let's make it reach the ceiling," Lily suggested, stacking her first block carefully. For a while, everything was peaceful. Their tower grew taller, each of them adding pieces and laughing when they had to stand on tiptoes to reach the top. Other younglings played around them, mostly ignoring their small group. Then Drax's shadow fell over their project. "That's a weak tower," he announced, his voice carrying across the room. "Just like humans, weak." Lily didn't look up. "Please leave us alone." "Why? Afraid I'll knock it over?" He reached out with one clawed hand hovering over their construction. "Don't," Pip said, his fur flashing orange with alarm. Drax laughed and deliberately bumped the tower, sending blocks clattering across the floor. Oops. Teacher Morris was helping another student across the room, too far away to notice. Or maybe he noticed but chose not to see. Lily couldn't tell anymore. "Just ignore him," she whispered to Pip and Rena as they began rebuilding. But Drax didn't leave. Grell and Vorna joined him, forming a half-circle around the three friends. Corthan younglings were large for their age, already showing the muscle mass that would make them formidable warriors. Next to them, Lily looked like a doll. "Why do you always play with these two?" Vorna asked, gesturing at Pip and Rena. "Even for a human, you pick the weakest friends." "They're not weak," Lily said, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound brave. "They're kind. That's different." "Kind doesn't matter when you're too weak to defend yourself," Grell said, echoing lessons learned from Corthan culture. Lily clutched Mr. Hopsworth tighter. The rabbit had been with her through everything. Through the colony ship disaster, through the months in medical recovery, through every nightmare and lonely moment. His worn fabric smelled like home, like earth, like her mother's hands sewing him together one last time before the accident. What's that? Drax asked, his eyes fixing on the stuffed rabbit. A toy? You still play with toys? It's not just a toy, Lily said quietly. Let me see it. Drax reached for Mr. Hopsworth. No. Lily pulled the rabbit away, holding him against her chest. What happened next occurred too fast for anyone to stop. Drax grabbed for Mr. Hopsworth. Lily stumbled backward, trying to protect him, and suddenly all three Korthan younglings were involved. They weren't trying to hurt her, not really. They just didn't understand how fragile humans were compared to their species. Just give it here, Vorna said, pulling at Mr. Hopsworth's leg. Stop it. Lily's voice rose to a shout, and finally Teacher Moros looked their way. But before he could intervene, Grell yanked hard on the rabbit's arm. Lily, still gripping Mr. Hopsworth, was jerked forward. She crashed into the block bin, its metal edge catching her face. Pain exploded across her mouth, bright and sharp. Blood filled her mouth instantly, coppery and warm. She hit the floor hard, her knees scraping against the rough surface. Mr. Hopsworth flew from her hands, arcing through the air. Drax caught him. See, just a toy. Nothing special. Lily looked up through tears, her split lip throbbing. Please give him back. Why? It's just stuffing and fabric. Drax squeezed Mr. Hopsworth, and the old rabbit's seams strained. Please, Lily begged, blood dripping down her chin. Vorna snatched Mr. Hopsworth from Drax's hands. If it's so important, let's see why. She began pulling at the seams, curious about what made this object so precious to the human child. No, Lily screamed, a sound of pure anguish that finally brought Teacher Moros running, but it was too late. Vorna's claws, sharper than she realized, tore through the old fabric. The seam her birth mother had carefully sewn years ago ripped open. Stuffing exploded outward, drifting like snow across the play area. Time seemed to stop. Lily watched pieces of Mr. Hopsworth scatter across the floor, each bit of white stuffing a piece of her past floating away. The rabbit's body hung limp in Vorna's hands, torn beyond recognition. Something inside Lily broke alongside him. A wail emerged from her throat, raw and primal, a sound of grief too big for a 6-year-old body to contain. She crawled forward, gathering pieces of stuffing, trying desperately to collect every bit of Mr. Hopsworth. Blood from her lip dripped onto the white filling, staining it red. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold anything. What is happening here? Teacher Moros demanded, finally reaching them. Drax looked confused by the intensity of Lily's reaction. It was just a toy. We didn't think... You destroyed it, Lily sobbed, clutching handfuls of stuffing against her chest. You destroyed him. The other Korthan younglings exchanged uncertain glances. In their culture, attachments to objects were considered weakness. They genuinely didn't understand why Lily was so upset. It was just fabric and filling. You could buy 100 more. I'm sure it can be fixed, Teacher Moros said, kneeling beside Lily. But even he looked uncertain as he saw the extent of the damage. No, Lily whispered. No, it can't. My mom made him. My real mom? Before she died. Those words landed like stones in still water. Even Drax's confident expression faltered. I didn't know, Vorna said, staring at the torn fabric in her hands. You didn't ask. Lily's voice cracked. You just took and broke and laughed, and you never asked. Grell stepped forward, perhaps meaning to apologize, but Lily flinched away from him so violently that he stopped. Don't touch me. Don't any of you touch me. Teacher Moros attempted to help Lily stand, but she pulled away from him too. She didn't want help from anyone in this place. She gathered as many pieces of Mr. Hopsworth as she could carry, and stumbled toward the medical bay, leaving a trail of stuffing and blood drops behind her. Pip and Renna followed at a distance, their presence a silent comfort. But they couldn't fix this. Nobody could. In the medical bay, a Quillen nurse cleaned Lily's split lip and bandaged her scraped knees. The injuries were minor, easily healed, but the pieces of Mr. Hopsworth scattered across her lap were beyond repair. The seams were too damaged, the fabric too old. Even if someone could sew him back together, it wouldn't be her mother's hands doing the work. Your guardian has been contacted, the nurse said gently. She's on her way. Lily nodded numbly, arranging pieces of stuffing into a small pile. One of Mr. Hopsworth's button eyes had survived intact. She clutched it in her fist like a precious stone. Through the medical bay's window, she could see other younglings still playing, their games continuing as if nothing had happened. As if her entire world hadn't just been torn apart in their careless hands. And somewhere in the back of her mind, beneath the grief and pain, a small voice whispered that Drax had been right about one thing. She was weak, too weak to protect even a stuffed rabbit, too weak to matter in a galaxy of giants. But that voice was wrong. She just didn't know it yet. The medical bay's door exploded inward with enough force to crack the frame. Sashara barely fit through the entrance, her massive body scraping against walls never designed to accommodate a fully grown Drakheim. Her wings were half spread, her scales radiating heat that made the air shimmer and her eyes burned with something ancient and terrible. Lily had never seen her mother like this, the gentle dragon who sang her to sleep, who heated her meals with carefully controlled breath, who spent hours adjusting furniture to make their home comfortable for a human child, was gone. This was a warrior. This was what nightmares were made of. Where is she? Sashara's voice could have melted steel. The Quillen nurse pointed with a trembling hand toward the treatment area. Sashara moved through the medical bay like a force of nature, equipment scattering in her wake until she reached Lily. The moment their eyes met, the warrior facade cracked. "Little spark," Sashara breathed, and her voice broke on the words. Lily's split lip had been cleaned and sealed with medical adhesive. Her knees were bandaged, but it was the look in her eyes that made Sashara's heart stop. Hollow, empty. The light that usually danced in her daughter's gaze had been extinguished. "They broke him." "Mom," Lily whispered, holding up pieces of Mr. Hopsworth. "They broke him and they laughed." Smoke began pouring from Sashara's nostrils in thick streams. The medical bay's temperature sensors started screaming warnings. Ice formed on the windows as Sashara pulled heat from the air into her body, a technique dragons used before unleashing fire. "Who?" The word emerged as a growl that vibrated through the floor. Before Lily could answer, Teacher Moros entered with the Korthan younglings and their parents. Commander Threx was a decorated warrior, his battle scars visible beneath his formal diplomatic robes. His mate Valna stood beside him, equally imposing. Both looked irritated at being summoned from their duties. "There seems to have been an incident," Teacher Moros began, his voice professionally calm. "A disagreement between younglings during play." "A disagreement?" Sashara's head swung toward him, and Teacher Moros took an involuntary step backward. "They attacked my daughter. They destroyed her most precious possession. You dare minimize this as a disagreement?" "With respect," Commander Threx said, his tone suggesting he felt none. "Younglings of all species engage in rough play. This is how they learn boundaries. Your child needs to develop thicker skin if she intends to function in a multi-species environment." The temperature in the medical bay dropped another 10 degrees. Frost spread across metal surfaces. Sashara's body was now so hot that looking directly at her scales hurt human eyes. "Thick skin," Sashara repeated softly, and somehow that quiet tone was more terrifying than any roar. "Tell me, Commander, how thick would your youngling's skin need to be if I decided to teach them boundaries the way mine was taught today?" Commander Threx bristled. "Are you threatening my offspring?" "I am making a point." Sashara drew herself up to her full height, wings spreading until they touched both walls. The medical bay suddenly felt very small. "You dismiss this as normal behavior, as cultural difference, as acceptable childhood conflict. So I ask you, if the situation were reversed, if my daughter had harmed yours, destroyed something precious to them, would you be so understanding?" "That's different," Valna said. "Our younglings are resilient. They're raised to be warriors." "And my daughter was raised in a colony ship that lost pressure," Sashara said, each word falling like a hammer blow. "She was raised by vacuum and cold and watching everyone she knew freeze to death. She was raised by survival itself. Do not speak to me about resilience." She turned to face the Korthan younglings directly. Drax, Grell, and Vorna stood behind their parents, trying to look brave but failing. Up close, Sashara was nightmare fuel, a creature from their species' ancient past when dragons hunted across multiple worlds. But Sashara didn't roar. She didn't threaten. She did something far more devastating. She knelt, bringing her massive head down to their level, and looked each of them in the eyes. "Do you know what you destroyed?" she asked quietly. The younglings shifted uncomfortably. Drax opened his mouth and closed it. No words came out. That rabbit was sewn by Lily's birth mother while she was pregnant. Every stitch was placed by hands that loved my daughter before she was even born. When the colony ship died, when the cold came and took everyone, Lily held that rabbit against her chest. It was the last thing that smelled like her mother. The last thing that remembered Earth's sunlight. The last physical connection she had to a family that died protecting her. Vorna's claws released the torn fabric of Mr. Hopsworth. It fell to the floor between them. "My daughter has nightmares," Sashara continued, her voice never rising but somehow filling every corner of the room. "She dreams of floating in darkness, of ice forming on her skin, of calling for her mother and hearing only silence. And when she woke screaming, she would clutch that rabbit and whisper to it about her day because it was the only thing left that knew her mother's voice." Drax's eyes were growing wet. Korthan younglings didn't cry. It wasn't part of their biology the way human tears were, but his eyes were definitely wet. "Every morning, my daughter gets up and comes to this learning center even though younglings twice her size mock her for being small, for being weak, for having a dragon as a mother. She extends friendship to everyone despite being rejected. She chooses kindness in a place that has given her every reason to choose hatred. And you dare call her weak?" The silence was absolute. Even Commander Threx had no response. Sashara's gaze swept across the adults in the room. "Strength is not measured by how much damage you can inflict on those weaker than yourself. Strength is my daughter, 6 years old and barely tall as my foreleg, choosing to get up every single day and try again. Strength is surviving what would kill most species, and still offering friendship to those who don't deserve it." She looked back at Commander Threx. "You speak of Korthan values, honor, protection of the weak, the warrior's duty to shelter those who cannot shelter themselves. Tell me, Commander, how does terrorizing a child half your youngling's size align with those values? How does destroying her treasured possession while she begs you to stop demonstrate honor?" Commander Threx's expression flickered. For the first time, doubt showed in his eyes. "If another species came to your homeworld and did to your younglings what yours did to my daughter, would you call it a cultural misunderstanding?" Sashara asked. "Or would you call it an act of war?" No one answered. No one could. Sashara produced a data tablet from the pouch she wore. With careful claws, she activated it and held it where everyone could see. Medical images filled the screen. A small human child frozen solid, skin crystallized, lungs full of ice, organs shut down. "This is what my daughter survived," Sashara said. "This is her baseline for pain. This is what she carries inside her every single day. And you dare suggest she lacks strength?" Teacher Moros looked away from the images. Even Commander Threx seemed shaken. The younglings stared at the screen with growing horror, finally understanding the creature they had been tormenting. "We didn't know," Grell whispered. "Ignorance is not innocence," Sashara responded. "Not knowing the weight of your actions does not reduce the harm they cause. You are old enough to understand that causing pain to another being is wrong. You don't need to know their history to know that making someone cry, bleed, and beg is cruelty." She stood, her full height once again on display. "I came to Sanctuary Station because I believed it represented hope. A place where different species could learn from each other, grow together, build something better. But if we cannot teach our younglings that causing pain to those different from us is wrong, then we have failed at the most basic level." Her eyes found Lily, still sitting in the medical bay chair, looking so small and broken and utterly exhausted. When Sashara spoke again, her voice cracked with emotion for the first time. "She calls me Mom. Do you understand what that means? To my species, I was a warrior. I had accepted I would never have a hatchling. Then I found this tiny impossible survivor and everything changed. When you hurt her, you didn't hurt a random human child. You hurt my daughter." Sashara's gaze swept across every face in the room one final time. "And I need you all to understand something. I would burn worlds for her. I would stand against my entire species. But more than that, I will teach her that love is stronger than hate, that compassion is braver than cruelty, and that healing is harder and more important than vengeance. That is the lesson today. Learn it well." Silence filled the medical bay like a physical presence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Sashara's words hung in the air, each syllable a weight pressing down on everyone present. Drax stared at the torn pieces of Mr. Hopsworth on the floor. His hands were shaking. Korthan younglings were taught from hatching that strength meant dominance, that power came from victory over others. But looking at Lily's hollow eyes and the scattered stuffing, he felt something new and terrible crawling through his chest. "Shame. I didn't mean to," he whispered, but the words felt pathetic even as he spoke them. "Intention," Sashara said. her golden eyes fixing on him, does not erase consequence. You didn't mean to destroy something precious, but it's destroyed. You didn't mean to traumatize a child, but she's traumatized. Your intentions are irrelevant to the harm you've caused. Commander Threx finally found his voice. You've made your point. This situation has escalated beyond what's appropriate for younglings. We will address our offspring's behavior privately. Will you? Sashara's wings rustled, scales scraping against the walls. Will you teach them that what they did was wrong? Or will you teach them to be more careful about getting caught? The Korthan commander's face darkened with anger, but before he could respond, Valna placed a hand on his arm. She was looking at Lily, really looking at her for the first time. The small human child sat hunched over pieces of her destroyed toy, blood staining her shirt, her entire body radiating exhaustion and grief. What would you have us do? Valna asked quietly. I would have you understand, Sashara replied. Truly understand. Not perform empty apologies or enforce meaningless punishments. I would have you look at what your younglings did and ask yourselves what values you're actually teaching them. She gestured toward Lily with one careful claw. My daughter believes that people can be good despite their mistakes. She believes that kindness matters more than strength. She believes these things because I teach her every single day that they're true. What do you teach yours? Commander Threx opened his mouth, then closed it. His military training had prepared him for countless situations, but not for this. Not for a mother's grief weaponized into words that cut deeper than any blade. Our culture values strength, he said finally, but his voice had lost its certainty. Then your culture is incomplete, Sashara responded. Strength without compassion is just brutality. Power without purpose is just destruction. You've raised warriors, Commander, but have you raised people worth fighting for? The question landed like a physical blow. Threx had led troops through 3 campaigns. He wore his scars with pride. But looking at his own younglings, seeing the confusion and shame in their eyes, he wondered for the first time if he had failed at something more important than warfare. Drax suddenly broke, free from his parents, and dropped to his knees in front of Lily. The movement was so unexpected that everyone tensed, but the youngling didn't attack. He pressed his forehead to the floor, a position of complete submission in Korthan culture. I'm sorry, he said, his voice muffled against the metal floor. I was wrong. I hurt you. I destroyed something you loved. I have no excuse. I'm just sorry. Lily stared at him, clutching pieces of Mr. Hopsworth against her chest. Sorry doesn't fix him. I know. Drax lifted his head, and his eyes were definitely wet now, moisture collecting in the corners. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I understand now. What I did was wrong, not just against rules, wrong. Grell and Vorna joined him on the floor, both assuming the same submissive position. We're sorry too, Vorna whispered. We didn't understand what we were taking from you. You should have asked, Lily said, her voice small and tired. You should have just asked why he mattered. You're right, Grell agreed. We should have. We were cruel because we thought it made us strong. But your mother's right, we were just cruel. Teacher Morris watched this exchange with growing discomfort. He had allowed this situation to develop by not intervening earlier, by believing younglings would naturally work things out. Looking at the consequences of his inaction, he felt his own shame rising. I owe you an apology as well, he said to Lily. I saw what was happening and chose to do nothing. I told myself I was allowing natural social development, but really I was taking the easy path. I failed to protect you when protection was my responsibility. Sashara's gaze shifted to the elderly Quillen. Yes, you did. And when you see another youngling being targeted, what will you do differently? I will intervene, Teacher Morrow said firmly. Immediately. No matter how uncomfortable it makes me or how it challenges my teaching philosophy, the safety of younglings comes before methodology. See that you do. Sashara looked back at the Korthan parents. And you? What will change in your home? Commander Threx and Valna exchanged a long look. Years of unspoken communication passed between them in that glance. Finally, Threx spoke. We will examine our values, he said slowly. We teach our younglings to be warriors. That's our tradition, our culture, our identity. But warriors without honor are just thugs. Warriors without compassion are just murderers. We've focused so heavily on the first part that we've neglected the second. Our youngest doesn't need to be a warrior, Valna added quietly. She needs to be a good person who can fight when necessary. There's a difference. Acknowledging the problem is a beginning, Sashara said. But beginnings are easy. Follow through is what matters. She turned her attention back to her daughter. Lily had been silent through most of this exchange, focused on the pieces in her lap. She had separated the stuffing from the fabric, creating small piles of salvageable parts. One button eye, part of an ear, a section of the belly where her birth mother's stitches were still intact. Little Spark, Sashara said gently, "Are you ready to go home?" Lily nodded without looking up. Sashara lowered herself carefully and Lily climbed onto her mother's neck, still clutching pieces of Mr. Hopsworth. The dragon rose, turning toward the exit. "Wait," Drax called out. "Please, can I do something to make this right?" "Anything?" Lily looked down at him from her perch between Sashara's ridge spines. The Korthan youngling looked genuinely distressed, his usual confidence completely shattered. "I don't know if you can," she said honestly, "but if you really want to try, maybe start by being kind to someone who can't do anything for you. Someone small or weak or different. And when your friends tell you that kindness is weakness, remember today. Remember how being strong without being kind just made you a bully." The words hit Drax harder than any physical blow ever had. He nodded slowly, committing them to memory. As Sashara carried Lily out of the medical bay, the remaining occupants stood in uncomfortable silence. The dragon's words echoed in the space she left behind, impossible to ignore, demanding action rather than empty promises. Commander Threx looked at his offspring, really looked at them, and saw younglings who had been taught to value strength but not character, who had been trained to fight but not why fighting mattered, who had been raised to be warriors in a galaxy that needed something more. "Come," he said to Drax, "we need to talk, really talk." As families departed, Teacher Moros remained alone in the medical bay. He picked up a piece of stuffing that had drifted under a counter, soft and white and completely ordinary. Except it wasn't ordinary. It was a piece of a little girl's history, torn apart by carelessness and cultural blindness. He placed it carefully in a container, knowing Lily might want every piece, no matter how small. And he made a promise to himself that he would do better, that every youngling in his care would know they were seen, protected, valued. No more looking away. No more easy paths. The medical bay's environmental systems gradually restored normal temperature as residual heat from Sashara's presence dissipated. But the impact of her words would take far longer to fade. Some words once spoken change everything. These were those words. Word spread through Sanctuary Station faster than light through vacuum. Within hours, every species representative had heard about the incident. By the next day, recordings of Sashara's confrontation were circulating through galactic networks, passed from terminal to terminal, translated into hundreds of languages. The dragon who had spoken truth to power, the human child who survived the impossible, the younglings who learned what strength really meant. Lily didn't know about any of this. She sat in her quarters, surrounded by pieces of Mr. Hopsworth spread across the floor. She had been trying for hours to sew him back together, but her small fingers couldn't manage the delicate work. Every time she got close, the old fabric would tear in a new place and she would have to start over. Sashara watched from her alcove, her heart breaking with each frustrated sob. She wanted to help, wanted to fix this with fire or strength or sheer force of will, but some things couldn't be fixed by power alone. "Mom," Lily said eventually, her voice cracking, "I can't do it. I can't make him whole again. I know, little Spark, but I need him." Tears rolled down Lily's cheeks. "I need something from before, from when Mom and Dad were alive. I need something that remembers." Sashara moved slowly across the quarters, settling beside her daughter. "Memory doesn't live in objects, little Spark. It lives in us, in our hearts and minds. Mr. Hopsworth was precious because of what he represented, but those memories are still yours. Nothing can take them away. It's not the same." Lily's hands trembled as she held torn fabric. When I held him, I could almost hear her voice, almost smell Earth's air. Now he's just pieces, and it feels like losing her all over again. The dragon had no words for this, no wisdom that could ease this particular pain, so she did the only thing she could. She curled her massive body around Lily, creating a shelter of scales and wings, and let her daughter grieve. They stayed like that for a long time. A chime at their door eventually interrupted the silence. Sashara considered ignoring it, but Lily sat up, wiping her eyes. "It's okay," she said quietly. "You can answer." Sashara opened the door to find Drax standing alone in the corridor. The Corthan youngling held something wrapped in cloth, his ridged spines flattened against his back in a posture of submission. "I know I have no right to be here," he said immediately. "If you want me to leave, I'll leave. But I made something and I needed to give it to Lily." Sashara studied him for a long moment. The youngling who had been so confident yesterday now looked uncertain, almost afraid. "Good. Fear was healthy when you'd crossed a line you didn't know existed." "Little Spark," Sashara called softly. "Drax is here. Do you want to see him?" Silence. Then Lily appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. She looked at Drax without speaking. The Corthan youngling knelt, making himself lower than her, and carefully unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a carved figure, rough and clearly made by inexperienced hands. But the shape was recognizable. A rabbit. "I can't bring back Mr. Hopsworth," Drax said, his voice shaking. "I can't undo what I did, but my father taught me to carve last night. We stayed up all night and he showed me how to see shapes in wood, how to work with the grain instead of against it. This isn't as good as what you lost. It never will be. But I made it with my own hands so you would know I'm sorry, not just with words, but with work." Lily stared at the carved rabbit. It was simple, rough around the edges, but there was care in every line. This hadn't been easy work for Drax. His claws weren't made for such delicate tasks. He would have struggled for hours to create something this small. "My father said that in Corthan culture, when you harm someone, you owe them a debt." Drax continued. "Not just an apology. An action, a change. So I'm changing. I'm learning to make things instead of just breaking them. To create instead of destroy." He held out the carved rabbit. "This is for you. You don't have to forgive me. You don't have to accept it. But I needed you to have it. To know that I understand what I took from you and that I'm going to be different." Lily reached out slowly and took the carved figure. It was warm from Drax's hands, the wood smooth where he had sanded it. She turned it over, examining the details. He had even carved small eyes, though they were slightly uneven. "You really made this yourself?" she asked. "Every cut. My father guided me. But these are my hands' work." Drax showed her his palms, and Lily saw fresh scratches where the carving tools had slipped. For a long moment, Lily said nothing. She looked at the carved rabbit, then at the pieces of Mr. Hopsworth still scattered across the floor of her quarters, then back at Drax. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said finally. "What you did really hurt. Not just my lip or my knees. Inside hurt. The kind that doesn't heal fast." "I understand," Drax said quickly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." "But," Lily continued, clutching the carved rabbit carefully, "I think maybe someday I might be ready. Because this shows me you're trying, and trying matters." Something in Drax's expression shifted. Not relief exactly, but hope. Small and fragile, but real. "His name is Hopper," Lily said, looking at the carved rabbit. "He's not Mr. Hopsworth, he's his own thing. But I'll keep him and remember that people can learn, that they can be wrong and then be better." "Thank you," Drax whispered, "for giving me a chance to be better." After he left, Lily placed Hopper on her shelf next to the container where she had carefully stored every salvageable piece of Mr. Hopsworth. 2 rabbits. One that represented everything she had lost. One that represented the possibility of growth. The next day at the Learning Center, everything was different. Not fixed, not perfect, but different. Teacher Morris had implemented new protocols. Any sign of bullying resulted in immediate intervention. Any youngling who felt unsafe had a direct communication device to call for help. The Corthan younglings kept their distance from Lily, but she noticed them doing something unexpected. When a small Quillen child dropped his art supplies, Grell helped him pick them up. When another student struggled with a difficult problem, Vorna offered assistance. When older younglings tried to start the kind of rough play that could hurt smaller species, Drax shut it down. They weren't doing it for praise or recognition. They were doing it because Sashara's words had planted something in their minds that was slowly taking root. The idea that strength without compassion was just violence with a better name. Pip and Renna stayed close to Lily, their silent support a constant comfort. Other younglings who had witnessed the incident treated her differently now, not with pity but with a kind of respect. She had survived something terrible and kept going. That was strength they could understand. During art period, Lily began drawing again. This time she drew Mr. Hopsworth as she remembered him, whole and perfect, held in her mother's hands before the accident. She drew the colony ship as it had been before disaster struck. She drew her birth parents' faces, using photographs she kept stored in her data tablet. She was creating a record, a memorial. These drawings would be her way of keeping those memories alive, of making sure Mr. Hopsworth's destruction didn't erase what he had represented. When she showed the drawings to Sashara that evening, the dragon's eyes glowed with fierce pride. "You are so strong, little spark," Sashara said softly. "Stronger than any of them know. Stronger than you know." "I don't feel strong," Lily admitted. "I feel sad and tired and still angry sometimes." "That's what real strength looks like," Sashara replied. "Not the absence of pain, but continuing despite it. Not pretending nothing hurts, but healing anyway." Lily climbed into her sleeping space, a hammock strung between two of Sashara's ridge spines, where she felt safest. She clutched Hopper in one hand, and with the other, she touched the container holding Mr. Hopsworth's pieces. "I miss him," she whispered into the dark. "I know," Sashara hummed, a deep resonant sound that vibrated through Lily's small body like a lullaby. "Missing never really stops, but it gets easier to carry. I promise." Outside their quarters, Sanctuary Station continued its endless cycle. Ships arrived and departed. Different species negotiated treaties and trade agreements. Younglings from 100 worlds learned side by side. And somewhere in that vast complexity, 3 Korthan younglings sat with their father and talked about honor, strength, and what it really meant to be a warrior. Change was slow. Change was hard, but change was possible. Sashara's words had proven that. Now it was up to everyone who heard them to decide what to do with that knowledge. 3 weeks passed before Sanctuary Station held its annual Unity Festival. The celebration brought together every species on the station for a day of cultural exchange, performances, and shared meals. Normally, Lily loved the festival. This year, she wasn't sure she wanted to go. "We don't have to attend," Sashara said gently as they prepared breakfast. "Your comfort matters more than tradition." Lily poured juice into her cup, thinking. Part of her wanted to hide in their quarters where everything felt safe. But another part, the part that was her mother's daughter, knew that hiding wasn't healing. "I think we should go," she said finally. "I think I need to." The festival was held in the station's central plaza, a massive space designed to accommodate species of all sizes. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling. Food stalls offered delicacies from hundreds of worlds. Music from a dozen different cultures blended into something chaotic, but somehow harmonious. Lily walked beside Sashara, drawing stares as they always did. The dragon and the human child, an impossible pairing that had become the station's most visible symbol of cross-species adoption. Pip and Rena found them quickly, and together the small group wandered through the festival. They tried foods that made their mouths burn and freeze. They watched Quillen dancers move in patterns impossible for species with only 2 arms. They listened to a lithoid chorus create harmonies that made the air itself vibrate. For a while, Lily almost forgot about the pain of recent weeks. Almost. Then she saw them. Drax, Grell, and Vorna standing near a demonstration stage with their families. The Korthan younglings noticed her at the same moment. For a long, uncomfortable beat, nobody moved. Commander Threx approached first, his mate Valna beside him. "Sashara, Lily, may we speak with you?" Sashara's body temperature rose slightly, an automatic response to perceived threat, but Lily placed a small hand on her mother's foreleg and the dragon forced herself to relax. "What do you want to say?" Sashara asked, her tone neutral. "We wanted you to know that things have changed in our family," Commander Threx said. "We've been examining our values, our teaching methods, everything. Your words forced us to confront truths we had been avoiding." "Words should not have been necessary," Sashara replied. "Basic decency should have prevented the situation entirely." "You're right." Valna stepped forward. "We failed as parents. We taught our younglings to be strong without teaching them why strength matters. That changes now. Has been changing." She gestured to where Drax stood with his siblings. "Our eldest has been volunteering at the Youngling Care Center, helping with smaller children. Not because we forced him, but because he wants to learn how to be gentle, how to use his strength to protect rather than dominate." Lily looked at Drax. The Korthan youngling met her eyes briefly, then looked away, clearly still carrying shame for what he had done. "That's good," Lily said quietly. "Learning is good. We know actions matter more than words," Threx continued. "So we're not asking for forgiveness or thanks. We're simply informing you of changes we've made because of your courage in speaking truth. Both of you." He nodded to Sashara, then looked at Lily. "Young one, you survived something that would have killed most adults. You extend kindness in circumstances that would justify bitterness. You are a warrior in the truest sense. I hope my younglings learn from your example." After they left, Lily was quiet for a long time. Sashara sensed her daughter's internal struggle and waited patiently. "I'm still angry sometimes," Lily admitted finally, "when I remember what they did, how they laughed when they hurt me. But I also see them trying to be different, and I don't know how to feel about that." "You can feel both," Sashara said. "Anger at what happened and hope for what might be are not contradictory emotions. Healing is messy. It doesn't follow a straight path." The festival organizers approached with an unexpected request. They wanted Sashara to speak at the closing ceremony, to share her perspective on unity, on what it meant to build a multi-species community that actually worked. "No," Sashara said immediately. "I have no interest in performing my pain for entertainment." "It wouldn't be entertainment," the organizer, an elderly delegate from a species Lily didn't recognize, explained. "Your words 3 weeks ago have changed conversations across this station. Parents are talking to their younglings differently. Teachers are implementing new protocols. Even the diplomatic corps has referenced your speech in treaty negotiations. We think others need to hear what you have to say." "Others heard what I said when it was recorded and shared without my consent," Sashara pointed out. "Fair point." The organizer bowed slightly, "But perhaps hearing it in your own words in context would mean something different. Or perhaps not. The choice is entirely yours." Sashara looked at Lily. "What do you think, little spark?" Lily considered carefully. She thought about the younglings who might be facing what she had faced. The parents who might not realize their teaching was creating bullies rather than leaders. The teachers who might be choosing the easy path over the right one. "I think maybe we should," she said slowly. "Not because we have to, but because maybe someone needs to hear it the way I needed Mr. Hopsworth. Something to hold on to when things are hard." So when the closing ceremony began, Sashara took the stage. Lily stood beside her, small and human and somehow not fragile at all. The dragon spoke. Not with anger this time, but with something gentler. She talked about finding Lily in the wreckage of the colony ship, about the moment their eyes met and something fundamental shifted in her understanding of what family meant. She spoke about the challenges they faced, the disapproval from both species, the paperwork and protocols and endless questions about whether this arrangement was appropriate, the daily work of making a life together when everything from furniture height to food temperature had to be negotiated. "People ask me if adopting across species is difficult," Sashara said, her voice carrying across the plaza. "And I tell them yes. It's incredibly difficult. But so is anything worth doing. So is building peace instead of accepting war. So is choosing understanding over fear. So is loving someone different from yourself." Lily took the microphone when Sashara offered it. Her voice was small, but the audio system carried it to every corner of the space. "I lost my first family," she said simply, "and it hurt so much I thought I might die from the hurting. But then I found my second family, and she's a dragon, and that seems wrong to some people. But it's not wrong. It's just different. And different is okay. Different can be beautiful." She looked at the container in her hands, which held pieces of Mr. Hopsworth, and beside it the carved rabbit Drax had made. "Someone broke something precious to me, and I'm still sad about it. But that same person is learning to build instead of break. And I'm learning that people can change if they really try. That's what hope is, I think. Believing people can be better tomorrow than they were yesterday." The plaza was silent except for the ambient hum of the station systems. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then hundreds of beings from hundreds of worlds were applauding. And not just with hands, but with wings and tails and crystalline chimes and sonic vibrations. They were applauding a small human, girl and her dragon mother, who had chosen each other when the galaxy said it was impossible. After the ceremony, families approached with stories. A Quillan father, who had been considering adopting a lithoid orphan but had been afraid of cultural judgment. A mixed-species couple who had been hiding their relationship. Younglings from different species who wanted to be friends but hadn't known if it was allowed. Lily and Sashara listened to each story, offered what comfort they could, and realized something important. Their family, strange as it was to outsiders, had become a symbol. Proof that love could cross any boundary if you were brave enough to try. As the festival wound down and families returned to their quarters, Lily rode on Sashara's back through the now quiet corridors. She held Hopper in one hand, the container of Mr. Hopsworth's pieces in the other. "Mom," she said softly, "do you think my first mom would be proud of me? For trying to forgive even when it's hard?" Sashara's steps slowed. "I never met your birth mother, little Spark. But I know that any parent, anywhere in the universe, would be proud of a daughter who chooses healing over hate, who builds bridges instead of walls. I know I am proud. So incredibly proud. I love you, Mom. I love you too, little Spark. Always." They reached their quarters as the station's lights began their nightly dim cycle. Inside, everything was exactly as they had left it. Lily's drawings on the walls, Sashara's sleeping alcove, the shelf with 2 rabbits sitting side by side. One rabbit represented everything lost. One represented the possibility of growth. Together they represented something more important than either alone. They represented a truth that Lily was learning slowly, painfully but surely. The past matters. The pain was real. The loss was genuine. But the future was still being written, and she got to choose what story to tell with her life. She could choose bitterness, and no one would blame her. Or she could choose what Sashara chose when she found a dying human child in a wrecked ship. She could choose love even when it was difficult, especially when it was difficult. As Lily drifted to sleep in her hammock between Sashara's ridged spines, the dragon hummed softly. The sound resonated through the quarters, a lullaby older than spaceflight, sung by a species that had never expected to raise younglings from other worlds. Outside, Sanctuary Station turned slowly in space, home to thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds, and somewhere in that vast complexity a small human girl and a massive dragon slept peacefully. Proof that family was not about blood or species or biology. Family was about choice, about staying when leaving would be easier, about building something new from pieces of what was broken. That was the real meaning of humanity's place in the galaxy. Not dominance through technology or conquest through strength, but the stubborn, impossible, beautiful insistence that love could cross any boundary, heal any wound, and build bridges where others saw only walls. And sometimes, when humans reached across those impossible gaps with open hands and hopeful hearts, the galaxy reached back. That was the story. That was always the story. Not humanity alone, but humanity showing others what was possible when you chose connection over isolation. When morning came, Lily would wake and face another day. There would be challenges. There would be moments of grief for what she had lost. But there would also be moments of joy, of friendship, of small victories. And through it all she would have her mother, not the one who gave her life, but the one who taught her how to live it. The dragon who chose a human child when everyone said it was impossible, and proved that sometimes the impossible was just the difficult waiting for someone brave enough to try.